Now, it's not unfair to say that most DLC follow-ups aren't exactly better than the base game that they come from, but that makes sense. I mean, they're not supposed to be. There's sort of an elongation or an addendum. It's like these glasses on me. Is it better than the base experience? I don't know, probably not. They're not intended to be. This feels unrelated. Let's go back to DLCs. Every so often, though, a DLC comes along that's so brilliant and accomplished in its own right that it ends up surpassing the original project itself. And so, as a sequel to our previous article on the very subject, here are 10 more video game DLCs that are actually better than the main game. These DLCs fleshed out the story and characters, fixed nagging gameplay issues, and perhaps even gave fans something they'd never even considered. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 more video game DLCs better than the game. Number 10, Blood and Wine, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Okay, let's waste no time in ruffling feathers. I'm not trying to be controversial. As amazing as The Witcher 3 is, and it is amazing, 10 out of 10 masterpiece, somehow Blood and Wine is just as damn good. It probably is better. Where to even begin on this one? The colorful land of Toussaint is jaw-droppingly gorgeous. It tells an excellent story with a concise 15 or so hours, the quests are more fun and less bleak, and the addition of mutations is fantastic. And if that wasn't enough, it also serves up a note-perfect ending to Geralt's story. Blood and Wine is basically the gold standard for video game DLC, an expansion crafted with just as much care as the main experience, and yet one which, through its aesthetics, its tone, and its overall emotion, is ultimately more satisfying to play. Not everyone is going to agree with me on this one that it's better than the core gameplay, but few would disagree that this DLC isn't an out-and-out masterpiece. Number 9, Minerva's Den, BioShock 2. BioShock 2 is generally regarded as a good but not great entry into the franchise, a game that categorically failed to stand out from its influential predecessor and basically ended up feeling like just another BioShock game. But 2K Games absolutely came out swinging when it came to the DLC Minerva's Den. Here, players take control of Big Daddy Subject Sigma as he navigates a new section of Rapture while looking for the schematics to the city's supercomputer, the Thinker. Beyond offering a few slight improvements upon BioShock 2's gameplay, it really just felt like a distilled, hyper-concentrated riff on everything that the game was trying to achieve, while delivering a far more emotionally gratifying story. Even at its most ordinary, Minerva's Den storytelling, including a twist that packs quite the punch, is leagues ahead of the main game, delivering intrigue, surprise, and heart inside of a tight 3 or so hours. This is the sort of all-killer, no-filler DLC that pretty much any video game that wants to have expanded content could dream about, so there's no wonder that it ranks highly upon anybody's top DLCs of all time lists. Number 8, Citadel, Mass Effect 3. Well over a decade removed from Mass Effect 3's release, most fans nowadays will surely admit that it's probably not actually a bad game, even if its ending definitely left a sour taste in many players' mouths. Thankfully, the Citadel DLC, the game's very last DLC pack, released almost exactly a year later, offering up decidedly more gratifying closure for the story and the characters inside a tight couple of hours. Citadel revolves around your crew of the Normandy heading off on shore leave and ultimately needing to untangle a conspiracy surrounding Commander Shepard. With its lower and more contained stakes taking place before the climax of the third game, lighter tone and emphasis instead on character interactions, Citadel is basically the joyous Mass Effect finale that the threequel wasn't. Nothing puts a bandage on poor storytelling quite like fan service, and in this case, it was most certainly needed, and at least in my case, who's complaining? The DLC, particularly the part where you have a party with all your buds, definitely did a lot of hard work when it came to quelling the simmering rage that plenty of us felt when hitting the end of the third game. Number 7, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, Borderlands 2. To put it simply, Borderlands 2 Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep is one of the most inspired DLCs ever made. Set within the D&D aping board game Bunkers and Badasses, this expansion ingeniously injects a weapons-grade dose of fantasy into the wild world of Borderlands, to dizzying, shocking, and massively entertaining effect. Everything here just hits. The story has surprising dimension to it, the locations are great, the new enemies rock, and Tina makes for a terrifically charming guide through the world as the game's dungeon master. Now, there's a strong argument to be made that Borderlands 2 is among the best or even the best game in the series. But even then, Assault on Dragon Keep offered up such an unexpected subversion of both itself and Dungeons & Dragons as well, that it barely comes out on top. Hell, this DLC went down so well with fans and pretty much everybody alike that it ended up leading to a full-fat release in 2022. And everybody liked that one too. Number 6, Phantom Liberty, Cyberpunk 2077. Even accepting that Cyberpunk 2077 released a little bit broken, if we're being super generous, and even if we accept the current state of Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty is still a masterful piece if we're talking about expanded content and downloadable content. More than a mere cherry on top of CD Projekt Red's laudable crusade to fix Cyberpunk, Phantom Liberty and its new locale of Dogtown is far more intriguing than much of the Night City depicted in the main game. This lawless district isn't just teeming with compelling dangers, it also benefits from its pared-down, no-fat map size, which combines the more streamlined story to deliver an experience that feels like pure, uncut cyberpunk, without any of the faff, bloat, or hassle of the main game. Phantom Liberty is one of those rarest forms of DLC that not only adds a bunch of incredible new content, it takes all the flaws of what came before it and iron it out to make the entire experience so much better that you'd really be doing yourself a disservice to play Cyberpunk without Phantom Liberty these days. Number 5, Shivering Isles, The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. No discussion of the best and most transformative DLCs of all time can be complete without Oblivion's Shivering Isles. Though much of the base game has frankly aged poorly over the last 18 years, Shivering Isles is a gargantuan meal of a DLC that's impressively stood the test of time. Bethesda could have quite feasibly sold this thing for a full retail RRP, given it throws players into a huge new region, gives them a ton to explore, new enemies to battle, and awesome weapons and armor to seek out as well. Honestly, the hilariously unhinged verbal diarrhea of the player's mentor, Sheogorath, justifies the asking price alone. And overall, the brilliant main questline feels like an apology for Oblivion's relatively anemic own campaign. Shivering Isles is, in a lot of ways, a lot more watertight and immersive than the base game of Oblivion. And another wonderful thing is that it really revels in the chaos of what it means to be a Bethesda RPG, far more than Oblivion before it. Number 4, Resurrection of Evil, Doom 3. Doom 3 remains by far the most polarizing entry into the franchise. What with its slowed down pacing and greater emphasis on jump scare driven survival horror over that face-melting demon-slaying action we've come to know and love. Most controversially of all, Doom 3's shotgun was terrible, which is unconscionable, and the fan favorite Super Shotgun wasn't even available at all. Thankfully, this was all remedied in expansion pack Doom 3 Resurrection of Evil, which, in addition to dusting off the Super Shotgun, adopted a more frantic, action-packed gameplay style in the vein of the earlier Doom games, while scaling back the horror aspects. In many respects, Resurrection of Evil was what fans most wanted Doom 3 to be, achieving a far more harmonious balance of action and horror, while its shorter length also ensured that players didn't experience the burnout that many did while they slogged through the main game. If you were left bored and unmoved by Doom 3, then this game gives you a way better understanding of what the game was supposed to be. Number 3, The Villains, Far Cry 6. Far Cry 6 marked the point at which the law of diminishing returns well and truly kicked in for the franchise, which seemed to confirm with this entry that it's basically out of fresh ideas for both its story and gameplay. Like, it's fine, but it doesn't make much of a case for itself. But Ubisoft offered up something really special as an addendum to Far Cry 6, and that was their villain DLCs. Now, these were 3 little DLCs that came as a trilogy that basically put the spotlight on 3 different iconic villains from Far Cry history. So you've got Vaas Montenegro, Joseph Seed, and Pagan Min. These DLC episodes, lasting around 2 hours each, come in their own nice little tight roguelike format that does enough to change up the series' well-trodden gameplay that it's still interesting while keeping everything that you like about it. Moreover, they lend extra context to 3 of the series' best-liked villains and just allow fans to spend more time in their presence. The Vaas episode in particular is a ton of fun, largely thanks to returning Michael Mando's performance, but each of the villains' DLCs is considerably more memorable than the rather flat core experience. Number 2, First Light, Infamous Second Son. Infamous Second Son was a solid, if ultimately unremarkable, PS4 launch title, and while DLC prequel First Light doesn't deviate too far from its predecessor's gameplay template, it does have one major advantage: a far more appealing protagonist. Now, Second Son's hero Delsin Rowe is arguably obnoxious to a fault, whereas First Light's heroine has a far more interesting backstory and is just generally a more likable person. Even though you've only got Fetch's neon powers at your disposal, and it clocks in at just about 3 hours, roughly half the length of Second Son's main campaign, Fetch's superior personality and more fluid combat and traversal abilities make First Light a brilliantly bite-sized spin-off that's ultimately more fun than the main game. Couple this with its more streamlined, laser-focused story and the inspired addition of an arena challenge mode, and First Light is basically an incremental improvement upon Second Son while ditching most of what didn't work. Number 1. Ruin: Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. While the majority of games on this list are at least very good in their base vanilla form, that is an argument that is a little bit trickier to make for Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, which is the game's clunky introduction to free roam gameplay and emphasis on dull busy work while making you avoid enemies who can legit teleport to your position made Security Breach more of a chore to play than anything. And so when it came to DLC drops, the bar was basically in hell. But Ruin actually benefits from being more linear than Security Breach, while cutting down on navigational frustrations. The stealth elements are less punishing, and the game actually feels more intense and scarier than its predecessor. It's also got way less bugs, but again, the bar was in hell on that one. While Security Breach often felt more like an exercise in self-flagellation than a genuinely fun time, Ruin, for all its own faults, acutely appreciated what it was that people hated about what came before and what they probably wanted to see instead.